So I hope you like my new intro. Anyways, folks, today my audio recording for you is a two-part, basically. It's addressing a stop with a police officer, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Trent Goodbaudy. Well, yesterday, unfortunately, he was stopped with some friends by the police and harassed, and this was while trying to get food at a food bank, and ultimately someone did get arrested, and the police threatened to steal their property and so forth. So I have the audio of this stop, and I wanted to go over it with you because whenever we're faced in this kind of situation, it's very easy because of the stress that a police stop can cause for us to lose our focus. And I wanted to point out some good things that Trent and his companions pointed out, but I also wanted to point out some errors that were made as well, so that you can glean from those things that may not be the best to do. Ultimately, I want to confirm I am not an attorney. This is not legal advice. It's just me expressing my views and sharing those views with the world. So if you don't like that, well, I'm sorry that you don't like that, but, at least as it stands, we still have a freedom of expression in this land, although that freedom is not because of the government, but regardless. So anyways, I will begin to play the video recording, and I will stop it, or audio recording, and stop at key places, and, kind of point out what things could be done better. Now, for those of you who want to know more about this interaction, I invite you to go to Trent's YouTube channel called Freedom from Government, and he's a very God-fearing man, and ultimately he is seeking to just stand on the freedoms and rights that we have, and trying to help others to do that as well. So, I would encourage you to support him. And, with this situation, it sounded like they weren't able to get their food from the food bank. So this location was happened in Carson City, Nevada. And again, this was at a food bank, so where they were stopped. So ultimately, again, let's hear what went down, and let's see what we could do better if that situation should come upon us. Okay? All right, well, let's get started.
An automobile, it's not a motor vehicle. It's private property and a private trust. And I've forced the state of Texas to dismiss their own case. That's the first one in 20 years. So I'll call your supervisor while you read that. It's not required.
I do have it, though. I do have it. I do have it.
Defend myself, sir. Yeah, you are. I already told you I'm in favor for my life. Call your supervisor and I'll hold.
So, right off the bat, I want to clarify this gentleman that's speaking right now is not Trent. This is one of the people that are with him. Basically, Trent is with a couple there, that man and woman, and there's a child in the back. And so you're going to hear each of them speak about these things. But right off the bat, I wanted to point out that at the very outset, um, there is a clear um, attempt to debate with the police officer or the police officers that were there. And so I will tell you that that will never work. Um, no matter how much you debate or no matter how much what you're saying is true, they don't care. You got to understand that there are people that were willing to cause harm to other people. Like, for example, when the Hawaiian people, before America invaded it, there were people that basically were told, go and do this. And those people did it. So they executed people based upon what the government said. So the problem we have today is we have policemen who unfortunately are willing to put their paycheck ahead of your rights and your freedoms. Okay? And that's a sad thing. Now, there are some out there, and I want to point out that, these are individuals that will stand for your rights and freedoms, like, the oath keepers. These are ex-military veterans and police officers who have chosen to stand up for people's rights and freedoms. And, I salute these individuals that do, because we need more of them to stand for our rights and freedoms against a government that ever encroaches our rights and our freedoms, and all for what? But I digress. Let's continue.
You have a driver's license? I have the right to
Plead the fifth on that.
the fifth.
We have the right to not incriminate ourselves.
Yeah, I have the right to not incriminate myself, and I don't know why you're trying to force me to incriminate myself.
Or to generate revenue when we're just trying to get food.
So right away here, the officer goes, do you have a license, registration, and insurance? So, right off the bat. Now, this was a great save by Trent to remind his friend. Clearly, his friend was caught up in the moment, having to deal with the police officer. So, it's very easy to get caught off on guard when you have armed men standing around you, threatening you, and being aggressive. So ultimately, Trent chimed in there and reminded him to stand on his fifth. And again, when it comes to license, insurance, and registration, you have to be mindful that we have the right to be secure in our papers. So that is part of that Fifth Amendment. And so you don't need to provide them any sort of documentation, despite whatever they're going to say. They're going to say to the contrary. Now, that being said, the Supreme Court has made rulings as it pertains to giving them, your name, your birthday. So those things are, according to the Supreme Court, not that I agree with it. I believe that we have a right of privacy, to go about our daily business without any interference if we're not doing anything wrong. And so ultimately, there's this issue, and ultimately what comes down to be the reason for the stop is that he didn't have a license or insurance or what have you. And so when the only way they knew that was because of the fact that, they had the Trent Goodbaudy license plate on their car, which is a big clue that gives it away. And so I understand why that's done. I have commentary on that, but that's for a different video. We're gonna stick to the audio recording, so let's continue.
Yes, I do.
Let's read this right on your thing. In respect, I, Decatur Matthew the family Thorpe, in essay of sui juris being rightfully sworn, proclaim under penalty of perjury the de facto U.S. public citizenship, being in substance privileged Roman citizenship, allows the constitutionally de jure government of the United States to be replaced with the de facto emergency war-powered military government. You're trying to get me to answer to a non de jure.
Right.
You know what that means?
We're
The name
trickery.
of war that's an occupied nation. I refuse to do anything that's going to incriminate myself unless you can prove that I have to.
Or that he committed a crime.
Can you prove that a crime has been committed? Because you can't even have those emergency lights on unless somebody's life's in jeopardy and there's a crime.
And you're on private property.
Okay, so here's the thing, folks. You know, we know that using the sirens without a legitimate reason, without a legitimate emergency, is not what is legal according to their own rules. But that arguing that argument before the officer is not going to help you one iota. So I highly recommend that you don't use that argument in debating with the police officer, because it doesn't work. You're not going to find one instance of someone pointing out that their usage of their sirens and their lights help them at all. You're not going to find one instance of that. So don't bring up these unnecessary arguments. What needs to happen here is the man needs simply to give his name and his date of birth, and that's it. Shut up and don't say any more. Because everything that is being said is being recorded by the police officers, and I guarantee you that they are going to go over the recordings, and they will look to see what are other things that were said. And so if you're going to choose to exercise your right to remain silent, then do so. Don't be arguing or debating or trying to have a court session there with the police officer. Remain silent. Let him do what he's going to do, and ultimately you can defend what your rights and freedoms are in a court. If that has to be the venue, then do so. I highly recommend. Don't bring up these points pertaining to the sirens. It never helps. But with that, let's continue.
Yes, I do.
I'm self-insured.
You're self-insured. You have anything that says that you're self-insured?
Yes, we do.
I just tried to give it to you and you refused to take it.
Are you attempting to get somebody to incriminate themselves by asking them questions? Because that's wrong, man. And you're violating the
You're
Fourth
on a dash
Amendment.
cam, too.
That's okay. You have no driver's license.
No,
we're not answering those questions, man.
I have the right to remain silent.
Quit trying to get this guy to incriminate himself.
There you go.
So you don't have a driver's license.
I never said that.
We're not answering that question. You got to stop asking that same question because we're not trying to self-incriminate.
How many hours a week do you spend in the law library? Because I spend about 60. How many do you spend? I know you spend about 60 hours a page. Why don't you spend 60 hours in the law library? You know the legal definition of driving is conducting commerce. I'm not conducting commerce. I had a family emergency and he was moved to the city.
Okay. So, here again, this gentleman, I understand he's under stress, and I don't blame him one bit, because of the situation is extremely stressful, and he's concerned. He's got his family there, and I'm sure he's worried that his vehicle maybe stolen by them, and you know, who knows, maybe even their kid be taken away while they're having to fight this legal issue over unimportant stuff. And so, I get his justifiable reason why he's not thinking clearly as to that. Oh, to just remain silent, don't argue, don't, make these debates, and tell the officer what he should be doing. You're right. He should be educated. He should know these things. But I'm telling you, you're not going to educate him there by the side of the road. The best education you could give that officer is to be respectful, to be calm, and don't let what's going on to disturb you, because ultimately, in the end, that will work for your favor, especially if you choose to remain silent. So let's continue.
You're not wearing a mask, you're not social distancing, man, you're trying to kill us. You're trying to kill us right now.
The door open when I
want us dead.
You're going on YouTube too. Just so
You're
you
live on YouTube right now.
Yeah, Mr. James.
Freedom from government. Look at him.
Go get your supervisor.
He's got the whole,
This is your last chance.
he's got everybody on the way right now.
It's
Give me
okay.
that. Call Heather. Have her call the supervisor and the attorney
Give
general.
me your phone. I gotta get the attorney general on the phone.
Okay, so there were 3 officers that I saw in the video there. The 2 that were dealing with the driver they were not wearing masks, face masks. So there was another officer that was by the passenger side window. He was wearing a mask, but ultimately, if that indeed was a major concern for them, I would say that, they would probably been wearing masks themselves. They were not. The passengers and the driver of the vehicle or automobile, whichever you want to call them, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, that's not the point of this video, or audio recording. So, again, pointless arguments, not going to help your situation. Don't do it. Let's continue.
It's sad that we have to call them every time. People, rookies like you, have nothing better to do than to
Shannon, be
pull
quiet.
us over.
I've done this 3 times. I'm
Right,
going to call the
agreed.
attorney general and have them educate their public servants, which are you guys. And if you want this laser profile, supervisor hear that. Okay, well, then I'll wait. And you call the magistrate on call, because there's one on call. If you use this situation.
You
The
people,
trespassing against the Texas
Can I see your other phone and call Heather?
I'm screaming.
Do I have to be in Texas to be a statesman?
Get it from Decatur. Don't answer that question.
I'm not
Never said
answering
that.
any of your questions. I have a right to remain silent. I tried to give you all my paperwork to prove who I am, and you refused it.
I've been
That's
better.
your fault.
Deal, like for real? Bitch, pull it down.
So what's your first and last name?
It's right here. You like to read filing?
On top? How do you think we're required for this intimidation you're doing to us right now? Intimidation? Yeah, you're truly intimidating us with all these armed officers around us.
Do I intimidate you?
Yes, you are very intimidating right now. You're trying to coerce us into incriminating ourselves.
I'm a Mennonite. I was born in an Amish colony.
You're trying to make us...
I don't even have your birth certificate.
Excuse me?
So, it's just, none of this is helping. None of this will help the situation, guys. I cannot tell you enough the importance of remaining silent. All these arguments and points to be made, those are things to bring to a forum like YouTube, and to, examine the stop and say, well, look at this. The officer obviously didn't consider this or this or this or that. Knock yourself out, doing that on YouTube. But you're going to only work yourselves up into a point where your emotions are going to get the better of you. And these officers are very tricky because you hear them, asking over and over and over again the question. You don't have a driver's license, right? You don't have a driver's license. Thank God that Trent was there with them, because honestly, I think they might have, otherwise the other two that were with him may have not realized and, might have said, oh no, I don't have a license. I don't know. But, ultimately, it is a stressful situation. And, this is something that, if you're going to stand on your rights and your freedoms, this is something that each and every individual who does will eventually face. And I want to say something about the fact that they're there as a group. That is a great thing. Being there alone and having to face this scenario is a lot more difficult, especially when you're surrounded by a bunch of cops with guns. Okay? A bunch of cops, as they would put it, brandishing weapons. Okay? If you or I did that, it would be called brandishing a weapon. So these cops are brandishing weapons as they're doing their Gestapo stop over an issue that's not even a crime. It may be, what they consider a traffic infraction, but it's not a crime. So they have no standing to really stop these folks. So let's continue.
You're trying to tell me I gotta go get one because I gotta go get an ID, right? Which isn't even a law?
None of you guys are wearing masks either, except for this guy.
Yeah, none of you
Good
guys
job.
are wearing masks, so now I'm really in fear for my life.
Yeah, we're really in fear for our lives because there's something called COVID. You ever heard of that? It's deadly.
I love this little kid in the background. I mean, I give that little kid a lot of credit because, given everything that's going on, this is a very difficult situation for adults to deal with. Here, this little kid in the back is telling these cops these things. Ultimately, of course, it doesn't work for their benefit, sadly. And sadly, this scenario ends up with the father being arrested, which is, that's a very difficult thing for a kid to see. It's traumatic, for a child to see their father being arrested by police for what? For nothing. While he's trying to get food for his family at a food bank. Clearly, this is a family that doesn't have a lot of money. And they're in a situation where they need to get some food. And this is the means in which they are trying to do that. Now, I invite each of you to listen to some of my other audio recordings pertaining to the 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment. And, you have a right. You have a right to drive. You have a right to travel. You have a right not to be under this government. You have a right to abolish it. These are all your rights. If you have that right to abolish it, if the founders had the right to make their own government, so do we. They were no one special. They weren't any more special than any of us. They had those rights and they exercised them. So can we. And unfortunately, as I pointed out in the beginning of this audio recording, the government likes to use fear. Fear as a justification why it can infringe upon your rights and your freedoms. And so this is just another example. They send out these individuals they call police officers to force you into by compulsion into compliance. And ultimately they'll arrest you and create all sorts of legal issues for you and put you in jail and seize your property, because the freedom that they talk about, they have sold it out. Okay? They have sold your freedoms, and ultimately it doesn't exist under their system. And it doesn't matter what case law you bring to them. Ultimately, they're going to decide that you don't have these rights and that they're going to do whatever they feel that they should. And they're going to try to justify it with some sort of safety issue, a safety concern for the public. Well, guess what? You know, our rights existed before this government did. And ultimately, we have to stand for our rights, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And, you know, ultimately, Scripture says that in these final days, you know, when they choose to try to force people to bear the mark of the beast, that they're going to put all persons, whether they're wealthy or poor, doesn't matter, under compulsion. So what that means is they're going to force people. They're going to have some sort of legal argument, some sort of safety concern that they're going to use, and they're going to push that so that the courts can compel rulings over your freedoms and your rights, so that no longer does your constitutional rights and freedoms matter. What matters is that this safety concern that they will push is more important. And so they've come up with this idea that, well, if we do it, you know, if we take the rights from everybody, it's okay. You know, as long as we're doing it equally. I'm sorry. That's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution doesn't give the government that authority. And clearly, the Declaration of Independence clearly says that the purpose of government is there for protecting our rights. Well, guess what, folks? The government is not protecting our rights and freedoms. It is taking away our rights and freedoms under varying theories of fear or safety. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, there's a lot more to this audio clip, and it's probably, I'm gonna have to probably do maybe a couple portions on this, because we're already 30 minutes in, and I don't want to make my videos too too long. So ultimately, this is going to be a part 1 to Trent Goodbaudy. Please go over to his channel, give him some support, pray for him. Pray for him and the family that was with him, dealing with this situation. And if they're having to get food from a food bank, maybe there's something we can do to support each other, especially in these critical times, hard to deal with, when, everything is being shut down and using this virus to justify why the government needs to do what it's doing. So with that, I'm going to end this particular video here, or audio recording here. And I hope that you all like it. And I will continue to share further videos pertaining to what happened with Trent soon. So, like and share, please. I really could use your support and giving me a little bit of motivation to do these recordings. We all need a little bit of support, right? So I would really appreciate anyone sharing this information. And I'm not asking anyone for money, but, ultimately, just knowing that there are others that really do appreciate what I'm doing here. Okay, take care, all of you, and God bless. And I hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.